Hi everybody, very happy to introduce Tom Benjamin and Chris Sims, who are joining us for an author chat tonight. And we're going to start us off with an introduction to yourselves and your books, maybe starting with Tom, because you're next to me.
Thanks very much, Kaz. Right, yes, I'm Tom Benjamin. I'm author of the Daniel Lester mystery series. These are novels set in Bologna, Italy. The third installment of Daniel's investigations was published in May this year, Requiem in La Rosa, and with the first, A Quiet Death in Italy, published in May 2020. And in short, my series follows the fortunes of Daniel, who's a British private detective working for the family firm of Italians, obviously, in Bologna.
Lovely. Chris?
Great stuff. Yeah, so I'm Chris Sims, and I'm probably best known for my series of detective novels. The lead character is Detective Inspector John Spicer. There's 9 in that series now. They're all set in Manchester. And then over the years, I've done the odd kind of spin-off, either standalone psychological thrillers, a couple of supernatural thrillers, and then a couple of detective thrillers where the character has actually joined John Spicer in the sort of latest edition of the Spicer novel. So I kind of merged two characters, 2 series into the John Spicer one. So yeah, that's pretty much me, and short stories, a few short stories as well that tend to get published in the Crime Writers Association anthologies.
Cool. Now, before we went live, you were both making me extremely jealous about being sat in my house in suburban Leeds. Do you want to tell everyone where you both are?
Yeah, go on, Tom.
Well, I'm currently not in Bologna. I'm currently in Albania, where I'm on holiday, and quite relieved that the wireless is working okay, because I had a few hairy moments earlier this week. Yeah, and so we've been here for a week, traveling around Albania, which is really quite lovely.
Brilliant. And I'm not in Manchester where I normally am. I'm down in Pembrokeshire, in a very small village called Manabia, which has one pub, which I am sitting in at the moment. So there we go. And it is a really lovely little pub as well. So again, I'm kind of fingers crossed the connection holds out. It seems to be very stable. Yeah, and been spending a gorgeous week on the beach in this humongous heat wave we've been having.
Sounds lovely. Can we get the story of how you two have met?
Yeah, that's okay. Well, I'll lead with this one. So, I just noticed, Kaz, there's a comments in the margin. Someone's asking what my supernatural books are. Do I type into there, or how does that work?
No, you can just tell us the answer.
Oh, I can just say, right, okay, sorry. Mm-hmm. So my supernatural books are Sing Me to Sleep is the first one I wrote, which is about a lady who moves into a very isolated cottage and starts to hear very faint echoes of bird song. And she can't work out if she's developing tinnitus or whether it's outside of her head. And then the second one is called Dead Gorgeous. And that's about all about human hair, actually. So if human hair creeps you out, this book will definitely creep you out. And the fact that hair extensions, or the best hair extensions, are made from human hair. So it gave me an idea for a very kind of macabre plot about that all links into human hair. So anyway, go on, Tom.
So that's excellent. That's really creepy. Yeah. And the first idea about tinnitus, I suffer from tinnitus in one ear, so maybe it's something else altogether.
Yeah, well, this is it. I was reading a newspaper article about tinnitus, but it was saying it normally manifests itself as buzzes or whistles or clicking sounds, but for some people they can hear either indistinct or recognizable song, or as in music, or then for other people bird song. And it's again, they don't know what the type of bird is. So that set my imagination going off on a supernatural thriller, cashing in on that one. But anyway, going back to how Tom and I met. So I edit an online magazine for the Crime Readers Association, which is a kind of sister organisation to the Crime Writers Association. But the Crime Readers Association is all about putting crime writers in touch with the readership, the people who are logged in now, I guess, and listening to us. And we do an online magazine once every 2 months called Case Files. And members of the Crime Writers Association send me in a forthcoming or newly released book, and I profile it along with a quick bio about the author, a couple of interesting snippets about the author, their latest recommendation for a crime novel. That all kind of makes a little profile for that person's entry. So when Tom sent me in his details for his first book, I thought, wow, what an interesting person, because he's I'll let Tom describe what he's been through, but he's done some very interesting things. So I thought, when I got the invitation to do this, I thought, oh, I know who I can ask to come alongside me. So I got in touch with Tom.
That's very kind of you. I was thinking, well, what interesting things have I done? I suppose, I suppose it's true. I certainly sort of chose my sort of jobs quite carefully at various stages in my life. At Scotland, you know, I one of my first jobs was as a spokesman for Scotland Yard, so that was that was fascinating, and that was really my entry point into the whole world of police and crime. And I also used to sort of be involved when there would be kind of VIPs and so on. I'd have to sort of the Black Museum, and where they had when I went, I don't know what they have anymore, but it was in the olden days. This is the 1990s. It was really ghoulish. And speaking of goulash, they had Dennis Nilsen's cooking pot.
Oh.
And Dennis Nilsen's cooking pot on Dennis Nilsen's fire. Which was one of these electric fires, not electric fire. Stoves, but it was like a kind of old-fashioned stand-up stove with metal, those round metal electric hub bits, right. And they had a cooking pot on top of it, and all along the side, it was filthy. All along the side, there was human fat. And then they had the cooking pot, and they had, as a joke, because this is cops for you, as a joke, they had some hair sticking out the top of it. And apparently this was the same pot that he had brought his. He used to work for what was it called, the the job centre, and it was the same cooking pot that he had made. The kind of the annual, what did he make? Hot pot. He made hot pot in this cooking pot, and he had brought that along to the annual kind of Christmas dinner or whatever it was they had. So there you go. So that was an interesting job. Sure.
Yeah, and your profile you sent me one of the, I call them the interesting snippets. I get people to give an interesting fact about themselves, and your one was being one of the first vehicles into Kosovo. Was it during the Civil War?
Yeah. I've been joking because here we are in Albania, and I was saying to my wife, where are the portraits of me? There's a kind of liberated to because they're really big. Obviously, this is Albania, and one of the things that surprised me not surprised me, but one of the things that struck me about Albania is really how strongly patriotic they are. And Kosovo is seen very much as part of Albania, and it's kind of really big in the news. And so after the police, I went into international aid. I worked in international aid for about a decade. and I one of the things I did was I set up a magazine called Developments, and it was all about international aid, basically, and through various machinations, I found myself literally in like the first or the lead, truck in the convoy that literally liberated Kosovo during the war there. And the British paras were they were kind of like going up kind of like going along the road, and we were like coming up behind them. And it was a very interesting experience, because we were in the UN, and it was a kind of weird sort of British Army UN political thing anyway. And it was a very interesting experience.
Yeah. Wow, it was a great snippet, definitely one that stood out. Where I often get sent. Yeah.
But no, it was certainly an experience to remember. That's for sure. Yeah.
I can see Samantha Brownlee, lovely Samantha, who I've met at Manchester Library. She's asking a question, Kaz. Shall I touch on that one?
I'm going to get there in a minute.
Oh, okay. Right, sorry. Yeah, okay.
Laura is on there as well. Sam says you're a drinking buddy in the pub after the Manchester event.
Well, I'm on holiday, so I'm making the most of it, yeah.
And Laura said that she read your first book, Tom.
Oh, right. Okay. The Quiet Death.
Crime theme. And she really enjoyed it.
Brilliant.
So I'm just, right, yes.
Chianti crime theme.
Excellent. Well, no, thanks very much, Laura. I'm sorry, I have to keep on putting that. I should just wear the glasses, shouldn't I? That's easier. But no, yes, the first one. Well, thanks very much. Yeah, the first one was very my kind of first impressions of it was funny, actually. I've literally, where's it gone? I've literally just finished reading my kind of holiday reading, the history of Italy since 1945. Actually, that's and I was kind of quite relieved to sort of realize I hadn't kind of missed anything kind of major, these sort of things. But I was also quite struck because they were talking about Silvio Berlusconi back in 2006, and I was thinking, gosh, yes, I've actually been in Italy since 2007, and A Quiet Death was published in 2020, but it was really sort of the accumulation of my kind of first sort of impressions of living in Bologna and all of the sorts of things that were going, the turmoil that was going kind of through the city at the time. And it's sort of very much focused on the sort of, it's not what you'd call necessarily, I think it's not what some readers would necessarily expect from an Italy-based crime novel. For a start, there's a lot of rain, and there's a lot of fog, and there's a fair amount of dirt and graffiti and stuff like that, because that's what Bologna is like about a third of the time. And because it was set among the kind of the squatting movement, which was resisting the land developers and all the rest, I sometimes feel that that was the thing that really interested me at the time. But then subsequent novels come along which kind of look more at like the food culture and the university, and are also set in the other two-thirds of the time in Bologna when it's quite sunny and lovely.
That's when I visited, and it was absolutely gorgeous. And I came back and just thinking that I didn't know what to expect from Bologna, because you only hear about Rome and Florence and Venice and all this, and came back from Bologna and I was totally bowled over by it.
Yeah, that's it. So I would very much encourage you to read the other ones as well, Laura, because I think that every time, in fact, the first three, because Bologna, as you were saying, Chris, is not a very well-known city. I think it's becoming better known, but it's not a very well-known city. with the first 3 in the series, I really felt that I needed to sort of build the world. Somehow, some. It's not. For example, with you, you're a Manchester-based writer, and you're writing to a British audience. You have certain sort of preconceptions about Manchester, as people do about London, as people might about Rome or Venice. But most kind of readers have got like, no, what is this Bologna place? And so I kind of felt I really need to kind of build the world, almost like fantasy writers do, and like this is the world, this is what it looks like, this is the kind of political climate, this is the universities, this is the food culture, this is the climate, and all the rest. So that was
establish it, and. I mean, the universities, I had no idea. It's the world's oldest university, isn't it, in Bologna? I think I've got that right. So I had in mind a kind of post-industrial city or something. I couldn't have been more wrong, really.
No, me too. I mean,
incredible food tradition.
No, absolutely. When my wife said, "Oh, well, we're going to Bologna," I was thinking, "Oh, isn't that all sort of cars and industry and stuff?" And I actually couldn't believe it myself, really, when I got there and saw that it's actually this lovely university city, much more kind of a mix between Oxford and, I don't know, Oxford and Manchester in its own way.
Okay,
Because it's like it's got the Oxford bit of like the university and all of that, but it's also got the gritty sort of industrial heritage as well.
Yes, which is definitely Manchester for that. The industrial heritage and the places being redeveloped and other places derelict alongside. Similar, very similar feel in that sense.
Are you from Manchester originally, Chris?
No, I'm from. I grew up in very rural Sussex. So south of London. My wife's from Manchester, so when we travelled around for a while and got back to the UK and had to decide where we were going to go, we'd lived in London for a couple of years, and Manchester was the logical choice, really. My wife she was a physiotherapist in the NHS, so she can kind of work wherever she wanted to, and at that stage I was still a copywriter in the advertising industry, aspiring to write my first novel, but not daring to take the plunge. So we moved up to Manchester because it's got the second largest advertising agency industry to London. So I was able to pick up work in Manchester doing copywriting. But no, so it's been good for me because I see Manchester through a sort of outsider's eyes.
Yeah.
And having grown up in a very, very rural, quiet corner of Sussex, moving to Manchester was amazing. We were talking about the sort of industrial heritage of it, the amount of mills, the canals, the Manchester Ship Canal, which is a full-on big can take ocean-going vessels, and it was dug by 30,000 Irish navvies, dug out the whole thing from the coast by Liverpool all the way back into Manchester. So those sorts of things, I just think it's incredible. Whereas maybe if I'd grown up in Manchester, I'd kind of just take it all for granted and not notice it so much.
Yeah, I wonder if that's a thing actually, because Trevor Wood, for example, he doesn't come from Newcastle. But his books are very much kind of set in Newcastle, and their fascination with the city there, and even just kind of, I was thinking, but I may be exaggerating, but as far as I'm aware, most of the best respected historians of Italy are British and Americans.
Oh, right.
There's a real kind of thing about outsiders being able to see, places with kind of fresh eyes.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, I think also it allows you. I mean, I've lived in Newcastle. I studied in Newcastle, and it does have a, you know, I always treat with caution when people sort of say, you know, the spirit of a city or the feel of a city, or a city having a particular feel. But there is a definite feel to Newcastle, which is different to the feel of Manchester, which is different again to the feel of Liverpool. London doesn't count because it's about 7 different cities all squashed into one enormous metropolis. So I don't think anyone can say they kind of know London very well. But yeah, I definitely think the provincial cities do have very distinct characters.
Sorry, but
Was she saying that to you, Chris? Or
no, she wasn't. She wasn't. I thought she was. But
You're okay. No author chats in the bar. Sam has asked if you can tell us, and I'll ask one of our other group favourite questions after this. Can you tell us what the most recent scene that you've written is, without spoilers?
Oh, the most recent scene. Gosh, you know what? I wrote a book last year, which is out on submission at the moment. So I've not actually properly started my next novel. However, I have been researching it in quite good detail. So I know the opening scene is going to be, it involves a guy who works as a security guard in a freight port, terminal port for those metal shipping containers. And the idea of the novel being, I read an article about Rotterdam's got an enormous freight port with thousands and thousands of these metal shipping containers stored in it, and the empty ones are shunted off to the side. But they often have, some of them have drugs hidden inside them, and it's a way of smuggling drugs into the country. But the gangs need to employ who they call collectors, which are generally fairly young kids who get lured into it, and they break into the terminal port at night, and they're told the position of the container they need to get to. Then they scale up the towers, the cliff faces of containers, and they're paid per kind of pound of drugs or per kilo of drugs that they recover from the freight terminal. So that was the idea for the novel. So my opening scene is going to be the guy who works as a security guard at the terminal, heading home one day and being offered £100 cash for his pass to give to one of these collectors to use his pass to get on site. And being a man of morals, he turns them down, and then it leads on to a spiraling nightmare for him, basically, because he falls foul of the drug gangs. So that would be my opening scene, but it's not written quite yet. But I've mapped it out in my head.
That's a great vision. This kind of like, you know, these kids sort of, you know, clambering up these containers. You know, that's very visual. That's a fantastic.
Yes, they are, and they're canyon-like. They well, it depends on the kind of cranes they use to pick them off. But the one I visited in Manchester to do my research, if the containers are empty, they can stack them 6 high. But he was saying to me in Rotterdam, which is the biggest freight terminal in Europe, I think they stack them 10 high, and these corridors go on for hundreds of meters. You know, so yeah, it is. It's quite an impressive system they have going with these trains coming across and lowering down and picking them off and going off and dropping them down onto the backs of the wagons or the trains. And
it's almost as if some things never change, isn't it? It's because, you know, in the Victorian times, they used to employ small children to climb through windows, didn't they?
Yeah.
And things like that. It's a kind of very sort of similar thing.
Yes, I hadn't thought of that actually, but you're right. Absolutely, the sort of Oliver
Twist sort of thing. Yeah.
We'll do that in modern times.
Yes, yeah, and the drug gangs very cynically exploiting these kids, thinking they're gonna you know make it up and climb up the ladder, but but as soon as they're caught by the police, they're just, well, they can't grass up who they're being employed by, and they're just left to cut loose by the gang. So yeah, similar thing.
Yeah, excellent. Yeah, no, to be honest, I'm glad Chris answered that question first, because my mind had gone completely blank, because I've just had like a week traveling around Albania, not thinking about anything. So to be true to the question, in so much as so like the third book came out in May, this May, and then the fourth book has got, it's sort of gone. I've done I've sort of finished the proofs, and so that's sort of done and dusted now. So I'm now working on number 5, which has a sort of a theme. It begins when my private detective and his father-in-law are invited to the reading of a will, and basically the person who's died has asked them to investigate the death of his son as part of his will. And so at this point, I've written, about 10,000 words. So I haven't written that much. 10,000 words of the first draft, but yet there are already indications that although the kind of consensus was that the son, the late son of the old man who died, had died in an accident, this may not have actually been the case. And the last scene I wrote, and in fact I hadn't quite finished, and in fact it's often a kind of good thing not to wholly finish a scene, because at least when you get back to it, you've got something to work with, rather than sort of looking at a blank sheet. He had my Daniel, my detective, had visited was visiting the house of the old man, and was being shown around by his daughter, and basically kind of bumps into someone who the old man believed could have been behind the murder, if there was indeed a murder.
What you just said about so this is just diverting slightly off into writing techniques, but always never finishing a scene, leaving it so you've got something to come back to. And I have a very similar thing, but I just start just the opening of the next chapter or the next section, whatever it might be. So I'm not finishing, chapter 10 finished and then come back to it the next day and you're at a clean break. I just write the opening lines of the next chapter or section. And I've done that for years as a way of being able to get straight back into the writing process and not having that horrible blank page syndrome. And I read the other day, Ernest Hemingway, no less. That was one of his pieces of advice, was to always never finish at a break, always finish before the end of the scene or just into the beginnings of the next scene, for exactly those reasons. So there you go. We're treading in Hemingway.
Us and Ernie,
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
So the follow-up to that question that our group like to ask is, have you ever acted out a scene as you've written it?
I've ever acted out a scene as I've written it? Oh, that's a good question. I certainly, my in case people haven't read my books, they do kind of have quite colourful bursts of violence every now and again, and a bit sort of Tarantino-esque. There's a bit of a slow burn, and then you'll get a very violent scene often towards the end. And I plan those out quite carefully in terms of the sort of the fighting, the combat type of stuff, and how that's going to work out. And I hope it gives it a ring of authenticity, because I find there's nothing worse than reading a kind of violent fight scene and it just not being true, and you just know, well, I'm not that I'm saying I'm an amazing street fighter or anything like that. I've got two older brothers who used to give me dead arms the whole time, so I am used to being punched a bit. But yes, I always like my kind of violent scenes to hopefully have a kind of ring of authenticity to them.
Well, in terms of violence, yeah, I mean, I definitely try to work out whether I think that it's realistic, it would work, or what have you. I mean, certainly in the first book, that was the kind of when at the beginning of the first book, when they find they find a body that's been underwater or in the water for a long time, and things like that. That was actually based on sort of experience, because when I was with the police, I was with the river police when they hauled up a body. Well, they'd already hauled it up, but it was they just brought it in, and you could see how it all sort of, you could see what it looked like, and so that was sort of based on something I'd seen.
You've seen that firsthand, because I know it's what water does to our bodies, and not nice.
Exactly.
So, oh dear me,
exactly.
I don't think I'd have bared to look at that. Too squeamish.
but I certainly think that also. And I don't know what Chris thinks about this, but I've tried to present my guy Daniel as sort of quite an every person, and certainly in the first book he's not very confident. So if he was sort of attacked, he'll fight back, but he's not sort of like, he's not really kind of super confident. He's not, and he kind of like grows into the role through the books. And so I try to, and you can see this with the way as he becomes more used to, for example, applying or using or responding to violence or what have you, because he becomes more used to it. And sometimes I think that in depictions of violence, less can be more, in the sense that I think that often readers, and probably the same applies in film, but perhaps even more in writing, fantastic things can happen in real life that you couldn't get away with in a book.
Yeah.
So I try to sort of bear that in mind.
Yeah.
A little bit.
I agree that with that point. The less is more, and you can hint at a scene or hint at what's going to happen. I always remember Val McDermid, listening to her at a panel one time, and a scene in one of her earlier books. I think it was to do with an animal, and one of the maxims of all writing is don't harm animals. Humans can be dismembered and all sorts of horrible things, but don't harm animals.
I wish I'd realised that, because there's an animal scene in the first book. Spoiler, but it's not a domestic animal. That's all I say.
Right, but yes, it's a sure way to lose a good chunk of your readers. I remember Val saying the dog or whatever it was wasn't killed, but she hinted that it was going to be killed, and then the readers just filled in, and she's had to pitch these questions for ages at crime events. How could you bear to have killed that dog in that scene? And she said, I didn't read it, but you filled in that gap yourself. So yeah, it's interesting that.
There's a whole website, isn't there, called Does a Dog Die? I think.
Sorry, Kaz, there's a whole...
There's like a whole website, I think, called Does a Dog Die? And you can like Google the book and it will tell you.
Oh, wow.
The animal.
Oh, gosh. Right, so that's how important it is to people, yeah. Gosh, yeah.
And then, so people use it and decide if they want to read the book or not.
Yes, yeah. It's tricky. My dog's under the table here, actually, and I one of my books, a dog does die as well, and I did find it very hard to write it, actually, because of the, but that, you know, I think you, if it's integral to the plot, you certain things have to happen that you're not very comfortable with as the writer. It's just the way it is.
I think this is a good question from Sam, from both of you. She said, are people you know surprised by how dark your writing can be?
Tom, do you want to go first?
I think I get more surprise from people about they were so, oh well, I didn't realize you had noticed that, or I didn't know, you know, I didn't know. I think, to be honest with you, they often say, oh well, you know, I didn't think it'd be that good, you know, or whatever. It's sort of like, it's more that kind of surprise than the darkness. I think. I mean, my books are. I think that, you know, the difference between our books. I think that I think my books are sort of more. Although actually, one of the things that surprises me about my books is that people don't think that they're as dark as they actually are, because I often have, you know, quite sort of graphic sort of deaths, murders. Gosh, the body count in number 3 is, you know, quite high. You know, there is a, you know, this isn't a spoiler, but it says, you know, is, you know, a serial killer at large. Well, and you know, I don't really particularly spare anything in, you know, the depictions of the death, but I think that because the setting is, you know, well, you know, pretty gorgeous a lot of the time, and people have this kind of, you know, preconceived framing, and in a sense, you know, almost because it's not Britain, because it's a foreign country, that kind of that sort of distances people from actually what's happening to some extent, possibly. People may not think that my books are, you know, possibly as dark as they actually are.
They actually
are.
I
don't really get that sort of question that much.
You're slipping it in under the net of a gorgeous foreign city and getting away with it.
Yeah, because, like, you know, I mean, in the last 4 books, I've had all sorts of, I mean, basically I've had almost every murder, defenestration, cutthroats, people being burned. I've had everything. There's everything in these books, everything. And yet, you know, at the same time, it's sort of, so they just talk about, oh, it's, you know, lovely, isn't it, Bologna?
Lovely setting. But with that question for me, I frequently get people I, you know, who I know who will read one of my books, and it's pretty much a uniform reaction. It's like, my God, I can't believe you come up with that stuff. And you seem so nice, and I get that reaction all the bloody time, and have to try and, you know, point out, well, it is imagination. You know, I'm not actually doing these things, but also my very first novel I wrote, which was a standalone psychological thriller called Outside the White Lines, and it was about a guy posing as a motorway breakdown driver, van driver, and he was just roaming the motorways at night, finding someone stranded on the hard shoulder, lone motorist, putting a flashing light on the top of his van, pulling over so the person thinks it's the AA or whoever, or a local garage, come to sort them out, and then very violently killing the driver on the hard shoulder and then disappearing off into the night. And the first draft I sent, my agent said to me, you know, we do liked it, but there was a few occasions where we hopefully you can hear me. I seem to have frozen at the moment.
Yeah, no.
Great, I'll carry on talking. But a couple of the times we didn't actually realize the person had died because you finished it all too soon, and then we realized in the subsequent chapter, oh, there's been a death. So could you just describe a bit more what's going on with the death? And I think I took them aback with how overboard I went with it, and then that got me that slight reputation for being a bit visceral, which I've scaled back massively. Actually, that was my very first novel, but yeah, I definitely sort of thought, oh, okay, this is a bit of a challenge. You want some blood spatter here, and then I think I probably went a bit over the top.
Do you think the setting changes how much people pick up on the violence in a book then? Are people more willing to believe that yours are more gritty because they're in Manchester?
In Manchester, rainy, dark Manchester. Could be a point there, yeah. Yeah, I mean, it is thought of as a gritty industrial city. So yeah, that could, and we were talking about this before we went live, Tom, about, I think we both make the city very integral to the plot, almost as a character in itself. And yeah, I mean, Manchester for me has got a very distinct personality. It's a very fun-loving city, but you can go one street away from that and be in a really run-down, derelict, neglected part of the city. So there's the shiny, lovely centre part, and then behind that, or just not far away from the edges of that, is a very different sort of city. Yeah, so it's a great city for me. I love setting novels in it. It works brilliantly. Sorry, that's my
your dog.
That's my dog. Something set her off. Yeah.
Actually, that's in fact, that was very much what sort of, you know, captivated me about Bologna in the first novel. This sort of sense, exactly that in a sense it wasn't a sort of like a typical Italian. It wasn't. What I didn't really want to do was Under the Tuscan Sun with murders. You know, one of the things that really struck me about Bologna was, although it is very beautiful, and, you know, very rich culturally and all the rest, and has its own personality and history and all the rest. And I'm deeply fascinated, you know, with Bologna itself, as, you know, I think you are with Manchester. It's also the home in Italy. It's seen as the home in Italy of the giallo, you know, the mystery novel. And there's this whole kind of mystery kind of culture in Bologna, precisely because it is this place where it's considered to rain more than other places in Italy. You have this fog. You have like probably the most porticos in the world. You have something like 40 kilometers of porticos. Yeah,
I think you need to say what porticos are, Tom, because I had no idea about that before going to Bologna.
Yeah. Well, they're kind of, I suppose you call them arcades. They're covered arcades, and so you know, basically, if you think of an arcade, but that one that stretches on for like kilometers, and you know, the pavement is under the arcade, and you've got the shops and the restaurants within the arcade. That's Bologna, and you know, you can kind of you can walk down the middle of the street where there'll be the cars, and on either side there will be the porticos, and then the pedestrians will go up and down the porticos. That sort of kind of gives you a very sort of enclosed sort of feeling. You feel very enclosed, and in the summer it's great because they're very shady, and in the winter it's great because you're kind of protected from the rain and the fog. But they can be very, very, very spooky at night time, whether it's summer or winter, because and that kind of lends this tremendous kind of air of mystery to them. That was the thing that really kind of captured the imagination.
I love those porticos. It's brilliant. So I'm getting a double echo now. Every time I speak, I hear myself.
I thought it was me that was going to have problems with the Wi-Fi.
Yeah. Kaz, is it worth me logging on again, seeing if that works?
Maybe give it a minute or see how it carries on, and then do it, because we've got 14 minutes left.
Yes.
And I think it was a problem for you, Chris, because from where I'm sitting, you look fine and you're coming over fine.
Oh, right, okay. Oh, you can actually still see me. I thought I was frozen out. Oh, okay. Right, that's fine then.
Yeah, we can still see you.
Right. That was just me.
Donna has asked what both of you use for procrastination. What are your biggest kind of things that help you with that?
Yeah, that's the perennial question, isn't it? I have a little writing shed in the garden, and there's no internet connection.
No internet connection.
In fact, I don't even need to take my mobile phone out there anymore because the kids are older. So school isn't going to ring me up saying, "Oh, we need you to collect your kids." So I go out there and there's no music, no internet connection, nothing. And it's all about reducing the procrastination potential to a minimum. And it works very well for me. I can normally write for an entire morning, uninterrupted, very concentrated, and then stop when I'm so hungry I have to stop for lunch. And I can get down a lot of words that way, and then I need to go back and revisit them and polish them a bit. But that's my way. I try and avoid procrastination.
Well, that's really impressive. I'm very impressed by that. I mean, these days, even though during COVID, sort of set up a little kind of home office, which is really nice. My basic way to avoid procrastination is to get out of the house. So it's the equivalent of your shed, but as we live in an apartment, we don't really have that option. So I will go out of the office. I will go out of the apartment and go and sit at a cafe in the summer. Haven't really, because it's really kind of post-COVID time now. But go and sit in outside a cafe, because they have it's quite excellent because you have the tables in the portico, so you can kind of sit in a table in the portico, so you're kind of covered but you're still inside.
Yeah.
And that's where I will kind of write and try and write. And unfortunately, I do carry my phone with me, so I will kind of check I don't have internet on the computer, but I will check my phone every now and again. But that sort of certainly lessens the distraction. And that's basically how I do it. And the idea, and also I think the fact that, I've got a deadline, and I set myself deadlines because the hardest thing about writing novels is that you're writing a novel, and it's like really long, and you've got to reach 80,000 words, and by experience that the only way that you're going to get there is by writing those words, and you set yourself a word limit, a word sort of objective every day. I try to write 1,000 words a day, 5 days a week. And if I don't reach those 1,000 words, I will be miserable for the rest of the day. I will not feel I've let myself down, and you know, the only way I can get to sort of to the weekend and enjoy the weekend is if I've met my word count. So it's this sort of stick to beat myself. So it's that stick to beat myself, I think, that
you do,
to avoid it.
you do need that discipline. I think that with all people who've written, you know, several novels, develop their own forms of discipline in terms of getting the words on the page. And it's obviously working, because you're working on number 5 now, Tom. So you must be producing a novel a year, roughly.
Yeah. I mean, it's number 5. Yes, number 5. And but that's the contract. Basically, I'm contracted to produce one a year, and that's very common in crime writing, as you'll know, Chris. Basically, they want one a year. So that's what I'm doing at the moment, and obviously we'll see how it goes. But that is also kind of a great motivator, because I think that, well, I've got to deliver this, and you know what? I don't want to spend a whole year writing it. Actually, I would really quite like to. I would like to sort of finish it in 6 to 9 months, and therefore have a few months to think about, maybe kind of like, you know, do some work on that, you know, perennial standalone that I'm chipping away at, or those other sort of projects that I've got. And so that's also a great motivator, I think.
Yes, I agree as well about having a fallow period each year where you're not actively working on a novel. I find I can't think of another novel at all while I'm working on one, but then as soon as it's completed, a fresh idea pops up or percolates up pretty quickly, and I can mull on it for a few weeks and then start light research and let it kind of just brew for a while, and then get into where I am now, the active going out, visiting places, interviewing people, blocking in the plot. But I'd love to have 2 or 3 months of just quiet thinking time and thinking about the characters, how they dress, what motivates them, all those little things, and just letting it all kind of percolate up in its own time. Or maybe fester, that might be another word.
So we're going to sneak in a quick sort of group favourite question, because we've got about 5 minutes left. What are your most memorable moments as an author so far?
Gosh. Well, I mean, I feel I'm a bit cheaty, really, but I was shortlisted for the Theakston's Crime Novel of the Year, going back a few years. But if you were shortlisted, you went up on stage, and Mark Lawson, who does the filming, cinema reviews and all that, he shook hands and read a little bio about me, and then ushered me off the stage again. So I guess in terms of professional sort of thrills, that was memorable. But then you get far more memorable ones. I don't know, the process of researching a novel and talking to such incredibly interesting people who, for one reason or another, have some expertise in the area that I need to find out about. Those are always great as well. So yeah, I'm seesawing between the two there.
Yeah, personally, in some sense, ever since I got published, the whole process has been just a tremendous sort of experience, and a tremendous sort of I don't know, it sort of left a sort of a big impression on me, because I worked toward it for a very long time, and so it's nice to actually be doing to feel that I'm doing something that I've always wanted to be doing, if that makes sense. So yeah, that's coming over to your professional point there, Chris, I think, really. Because there is a sort of difference between sort of a kind of, there is a pre being published and a post being published time, I think, for every writer. And, you know, because it just gives you a certain amount of confidence, and it feels that a lot of the work that you've been working on has been sort of appreciated, which is great. So that's been good. But I remember I got my second. I was very, very fortunate enough to get reviewed in the Daily Mail. You know, which is, you know, their book reviewers are really well respected, and the first review for A Quiet Death said, well, you know, it's a promising debut and everything, and that was fantastic. And then the second, then amazingly, it was reviewed a second time. I mean, my second novel was reviewed, and the reviewer said, "Oh, you know, this is this promotes Tom Benjamin to the first division of crime writers," or something like that. Nice. And for me, that was just, I mean, I haven't won or been shortlisted for any awards or anything, but from them, for me, that really meant a huge amount, actually.
Yeah.
Because, you know, when a professional crime writing reviewer for, you know, the Mail, which is really respected in this area, you know, says something like that, for me it was a real moment, actually.
Yeah. Validation, isn't it?
Validation is the word.
It is. All authors crave validation, I think, and yeah, reviews are a great way of getting that.
Yeah. So that was pretty memorable, I'd say.
Yeah, brilliant.
Sounds like it. So we've got 3 minutes left. Do you want to finish us off by just giving everyone a reminder about yourselves and your books? Maybe tell them what they should be going away to buy.
Chris?
Okay. So my kind of core series, of which there are 9, are the Detective Inspector John Spicer books, and then floating around them are a couple of standalone psychological thrillers called Outside the White Line, my very first one, Pecking Order, and then a couple of supernatural thrillers, Dead Gorgeous, Sing Me to Sleep. And
so I haven't got quite so many novels under my belt as Chris, just the 3 so far. But in the Daniel Lester series, that's A Quiet Death in Italy, The Hunting Season, and Requiem in La Rosa. Although I would say that until the end of the month, Requiem in La Rosa is on a 99p Kindle deal. So that's actually quite a bargain, since it only came out in May. and you know, I noticed before, like the Kindle for it was £5 something. So yeah, so if you're interested in trying it out on Kindle, I'd try now.
Grab it. Yeah.
Grab it.
Good offer. And then thank you both for taking time out of your holidays to come and join us.
Yeah. Thanks for inviting us. Yeah, it's really good. Much appreciated.